Okay, today is apparently the first day of Mercury retrograde in October 2020, and it feels like I've been having retrograde I don't know, it started early. And it's primary that part of Mercury retrograde that has to do with reviewing the past. And the number one thing that's come up so far with Mercury retrograde is racism. Why do we review? Well, it's a review of human history. If I don't look, then I'm not your race or something. And all the ideas that go along with race, which have long since been discredited, but the idea that certain races are more intelligent, certain races are more athletic, certain races are maybe more psychic, certain races are more likely to have groupthink. Certain races are closer to Mother Earth. Certain races are more spiritual. Certain races are more warlike. Certain races are more likely to keep human slaves. Certain races have got bigger brains. Certain races have got bigger penises. What is this all about, and why is it all coming up again and again and again? I don't know. But for me, that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a lot of this stuff bubbling up. I don't really understand why now, other than, it's Mercury retrograde and we've got to go back and revisit some things. What is the truth about human races? Well, anyone looking at this body would say it's white. Right? I mean, it's pretty much obvious that certain groups of people from what we're told are different parts of the earth have different skin colors, and different features look a little bit different. But we're always told in biology class that underneath the cosmetic part of this skin suit, we all have the same gear inside. I can't believe I'm still talking about this in 2020. There's a lot of, no, I guess we're not going, I was going to talk about stories that go along with, you know, race. But I think what I'm being given to talk about is pretty much get yourself away from getting involved with trying to teach people about race. So why is it coming up for me? Okay, this basketball has got the face of an extraterrestrial, so I like to use him to give you an idea what might be going on other planets out there in the galaxy. The answer from this particular extraterrestrial is yes, I am a basketball-headed extraterrestrial. Does it make me different than you because this particular extraterrestrial has different gear on the inside? I mean, let's say he's got a 5-chambered heart, and he has no liver. He's got some other organs that do the function of what a human uses the liver for. Does it make a difference, the cosmetic outside, the gear inside the body? Is it the mind associated with this body? Is there a huge difference between us and extraterrestrials, regardless of what they look like? I don't know any extraterrestrials. And all we have is, science fiction movies to get an idea of what extraterrestrials might be like. And the other thing that we have are certain people on YouTube, for example, that channel beings that say they are extraterrestrial. This is my Supernatural hat from the TV show Supernatural. What is supernatural going on right now? For all of us, we are going through a change. Pretty much a lot of people don't know that we're going through a change because they don't know. But we are going through a change. And the reason we're going through a change is because there are a lot more people meditating on planet Earth today than there were 50 years ago, 100 years ago, etc. And it's the fact that people taking time out to be silent changes things for everyone. And the changes are perhaps evolutionary in nature. So what do you need to know right now about everything I've told you in this talk? Is it spiritual first aid? No, it's not Switzerland either, but it is a sort of form of getting help. Spiritual emergence is a kind of a thing that people can need help with. What is that? Well, in the old days, people who were having spiritual emergence, unless they were under the tutelage of a guru who knew things, people having spiritual emergence probably ended up at the emergency department of a hospital and were shipped out to the psych ward. But, the psychiatrists are not qualified to deal with spiritual things. And so it's the wrong place to send people who are having bizarre things going on with their minds and perceptions. And, how many of these so-called gurus are there out there that can help with spiritual emergence problems? Are you going to go down to the place that's, full of yoga mats and people are doing, hot yoga? Are you going to go there for help? The answer is, I don't think you're going to get too much help anywhere you go. In order to get help, first of all, the people that you're going to see help are going to have to already be very familiar with the spiritual emergence, probably by going through it themselves at a previous time. And they're going to have had to stabilize themselves after the spiritual emergence happened for themselves. I mean, you're not going to go to the psych ward to go and check in with the people in the psych ward to see if any of them can help you. You want somebody who has been through all this. And then the person still, are they going to be able to help you? Big question. Okay, so getting back to the issues of race, what is coming up about race? It is always about somehow, it's different for me than it is for you because I look different. I mean, if you found an expert in yoga who was an extraterrestrial, does that mean the extraterrestrial couldn't help you? Well, I mean, if we look at our sci-fi movies, clearly Master Yoda was of a different species than Luke Skywalker. And the issue still comes down to, if we have so many problems with race among human beings, how on earth are we going to deal with extraterrestrials? The reason we're talking about extraterrestrials these days is because you only have to get away from the city and look up at the stars at night and say, my God, there's a lot of stars up there with a lot of potentially habitable planets. Where are the extraterrestrials? Well, they got to be there. Are they knocking on our door for the so-called first contact? Yes, I keep hearing it from those extraterrestrials who are being channeled in by humans here on planet Earth. And they say, yeah, first contact with extraterrestrials is right around the corner for many of you. The extraterrestrials say, we're not going through your governments. The long story is, back in like the 1950s, the extraterrestrials talked to our governments, and the governments didn't play ball with the extraterrestrials. So it was always called tin hat if you talked about extraterrestrials being real. But again, I say, you look up at the number of stars up there. If you think somehow that there's no extraterrestrials, I'm going to tell you, you're nuts. But, the stories are the government suppressed all the information about extraterrestrials since the 1950s, and here we are, 70 years later, and what do we got to go on? Well, let's go with Yoda. Let's go with the idea that there are extraterrestrial species where there are spiritual masters. And they might not look like us. How are you going to deal with this? And it comes back to race. I mean, there's still plenty of people of perhaps my color that are afraid to go to an area of a town where people have a different color skin. It's true. How are they going to deal with, the area of town where the extraterrestrials are? They're not going to have an easy time with that. So, where are we going with all this? The answer for Mercury retrograde is we are still reviewing the stories that are being told by humans about different racial groups. And the stories are pretty much the same. The stories are often tinged with that other racial group, has a long history of abusing my racial group. What's that got to do with you in whatever color skin you're in right now? Pretty much it's got everything to do with you. Are you going to buy into these ideas that somehow you have got to uphold these stories today, and when you're looking at a person of a different color skin than what you have, you're going to look at them and you're going to attach all these racial stories to that person? And this is always the issue. It's very touchy, isn't it? It's still very touchy. I know, because I live in a multiracial city. And issues around race for me are touchy. Is it because of my age? Or is it because of what's going on right now? I would say, what would be things that have to do with my age? Well, it was just what we were brought up with. Pretty much what we got was what we got from the newspaper, from the news, from movies, from television, from stories being told by different people about this, that, the next thing. And a certain touchiness around, I don't want to talk about race. Because I still have the feeling that this is a subject that is likely to blow up in my face. Blow up how? It's just like a feeling. It's just like, wouldn't it be better if we were all one color on planet Earth? Then I wouldn't feel touchy about but that's not the way it is. Even still, I don't want to walk away from these stories that come up. I still want to point my finger and say, that's racist story. Why is it racist? Well, the worst part of racism is grouping people together. All white people think the same. And they're just like their ancestors. They're all about conquering the rest of the world and beating everybody else into submission. And then changing history so it's always white heroes. And it's always white scientists who discovered everything that was ever worthwhile on planet Earth. And they suppress all of the history of every other race on the planet. Actively suppress it. Is it true? What about the official stories? Well, I got to tell you, when I was a child in school, the history that was presented to us as Canadian history was about the white people coming from Europe to North America. What did we learn about African history? Nothing. Asian history? Nothing. That's all we got. So it was really biased history that was presented in public schools to us. That's Canadian history. I was age 10 in 1975. So I'm going to tell you, government schools for my generation dropped the ball. They dropped the ball. And how that's being presented today in the schools, I don't know. I don't know, but I just see people who are of, well, they say they're I don't know if they say they're representing it, but it's a story from a certain racial group, and it's still saying things that were considered eugenics, which was like, I don't know, let's go with like 1925. And it was pretty much the study of race, the study of all of these things that I mentioned at the beginning of the talk. And it had an agenda. The agenda was to keep the races apart, to keep them separate, to make individual races feel superior to others, and to belittle other races. And it's pretty much a horrible, horrible story, because in the end it was used to justify the Holocaust. That is, the slaughter of people with a Jewish background. So we're not talking about it doesn't really matter. It matters big time. How are we going to heal? Because this is all trauma. It's trauma and lies that are fed out as being truths. And it's true. There are still people who are hateful people, who hate others based upon race. But it certainly doesn't mean that the majority of any one race is racist. But it's the margins that is always an issue. And that's why I still feel touchy around people who are of a different race than I am when it comes to certain things, because I'm always afraid I'm going to say something wrong. And then I start feeling all queasy and I start to sweat. It's like, should I even, it's mostly like, God, I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to deal with it. And it's just like, queasy. Queasy, queasy, queasy. It's like I feel like I'm going to go and have to run to the bathroom because I'm going to have diarrhea because it feels queasy. What is it that I'm feeling that's making me feel queasy? I don't know. It's just, what is it? Am I embarrassed? Why should I be embarrassed? There's all kinds of feelings, and they're unpleasant. I don't want to offend other people. Because when I was about 10 or 15 years old, some of the things that I told to other people, were offensive to them. And where did I learn the things? Pretty much from, people in my life. And you know when you've said something wrong because you see the reaction. And once you've had this happen to you, you don't trust your teachers because they lied to you and they gave you stuff, or they, by omission, didn't give you the information you needed. Who do you trust? It's basically, I don't know, I feel like I've been lied to and I feel like I'm wrong. And, I'm 10 years old or I'm 15 years old. And I just feel really uncomfortable about the whole situation. And I just want to go to my room and lie down. But, that doesn't really solve the issues. And the issues still are you see someone and you say, that is a purple person. And purple people in general have these characteristics. And purple history is pretty much, well, purple and green people never got along very well, according to the stories. The stories the purple people tell are the green people were pretty much nasty to us. They went out of their way to be nasty to us. You talk to the green people, and they're going to tell you, it's the purple people that were the root of the problem. It's always division. It's always division. Our group was right, our group was wrong, and maybe in some cases, well, our group was wrong about that, but there was lots of other incidents when we were right. It's always right and wrong. It's always right and wrong. It was always... It's not an easy thing to clear. So it's coming up again, and what do you define as racist? I define racist as saying people of a certain racial group, purple, think this way, they're good at this, they're not so good at that. They tend to have bigger ears than everyone else. The history of the purple people is, I have to make something up. I can't do it. I can't do it. It just doesn't serve. It doesn't serve. And when I go out and I see people of different races, I hear voices in my head. The other personalities that talk to me by telepathy quite often say, when they see, that's a black person, they'll say whatever country it is that person came from. And as they see them, it's like the first thing. And I go, Jesus Christ, after all this time of me being visited telepathically by extraterrestrials, why is that the first thing that the extraterrestrials note? The person's race is the first thing that comes up. Now, granted, I think most of us can get a pretty good idea of where someone's roots came from by looking at them. I can usually tell if somebody's Italian looking. Pretty much from anywhere. After so many years, you get pretty good. But, I guess I tend to suppress it. It's like, I see it and it's like, well, it's of no value to me, other than the queasy feeling I get about why is that the first thing that's coming to my head? Why is it the first thing that comes to the extraterrestrials that talk to me? Why is it the first thing? Why is it important? Is this like ancient tribal instincts that are coming up? Because, like hundreds of years ago, if you saw somebody of a different race, it usually meant that there was going to be a war. So the first thing, it's like, you see a certain kind of a snake. Is it poisonous? Does it bite? Is a boa constrictor? Is it going to get me? Is that what it is? Could be. If I'm a couple weeks ago, I was surprised to see that there was a bee on my fly, the fly of my pants, when I was sitting down in the bathroom. I kind of freaked out. What was the first thought? I don't want to be stung. On my dick pic. And it's like, somebody says maybe it's your reptilian brain or something. I don't know what it is. But I know that we have certain abilities, and pretty much what those abilities are is the ability to talk about these things, see where we're at. And then, when I look at somebody's story that says that, this race has these characteristics of intelligence, of artistic abilities, creative abilities, things about their physical body. I'm sorry, those things are racist. And they are, what's even worse than, saying that these characteristics go with this race is the idea that everyone of a certain race is alike. They think alike. They are alike. And then it becomes more difficult because in certain ways, like culture, like everybody that came from, you pick a country, has a certain country culture. And that gets thrown in and mixed in with the race. And, in my generation, and previous generations, there were racial jokes. Most of the racial jokes were laughed at. Were they hurtful? I think they could be hurtful. But they were told, and in the stores in our local mall, you could buy a book of racial jokes about pretty much any different racial group or any different country. You could get these, it wasn't censored. It was right there for you to buy as a child. Yeah, we laughed about them. So, how can we laugh without causing hurt about these things? The answer is, I don't know. It's a big elephant in the room.